Agricultural corn, silage, cow corn. What cow corn needs, it needs temperatures up to 60 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and it needs to be planted in the ground inch to inch and a half deep and 2 to 4 inches apart, like this representation here. For the different stages, each corn gets taller and taller and a little bit tighter. This is the finished stage, the fully grown stage. This is the third stage of corn, like before it turns into that, and then second stage, and then that's the first stage, and progressively goes. Which then corn also needs high nutrients for it to grow properly. The higher the nutrient recommendations are replaced, nutrients removed, not because the crop will respond. The higher fertilizers application is a short term, so it needs high. Which then the money generated isn't a part of this. Cow corn slash silage is used for making milk or sheep. It helps with that for feeding them. It's a mixture of their food. Which then the struggles it causes is that it needs a certain temperature, which then it also needs a high fertilizer, which can be costly, and then you have to plan ahead before you plant because of the temperature and things. Which then there is a good for the community. Cow corn is a high thing in Vermont because it's used for the milk industry. Which then it can either be a small industry, small or medium, or a large industry with giant equipment that's very expensive to the basic equipment that you need that isn't too expensive, and older equipment, which then we'll start with the older equipment. Older equipment is stuff for like back then in like the 60s and 70s there wasn't much, so you had your basic homemade made or bought plow or cultivator, which then you also had a tractor with a trailer, then a bought forester, which then you also have either a truck or the trailer, and then you have your solid fertilizer, which then the medium one, which is basically today's equipment but cheaper. You have disc plows, solid fertilizer, liquid fertilizer, newer-ish tractors, solid fertilizer, and water fertilizer, which then also can kill weeds, which is the problem. Which then the newer ones, you can have expensive equipment that are really huge, very high-tech, more easier and faster placement, and longer and bigger. Which then the evidence to support this is that on the website of Harvest to Table, it talks about the temperatures of corn and stuff. Which then also Extension PSU EDU talks about it as well. Which in the process it goes to farm to table, it is that it grows. Farm to table, there is about to farm to cow. You need to prepare your soil with good areas, which you need a high pH level and nitrogen level for it to grow. Which then after you plant it, which some planters that you have, which here's one example, will have an already seed to fertilizer mix. Some of them don't, which then you'll use the fertilizer from 4 different ways of fertilizer to fertilize it, which then it will grow over time, which then over time certain sizes of corn weeds will happen, which then when you have these weeds happen, you'll have a fertilizer with a sprayer like this, or the bigger sprayer over there to have a weed killer or a manual weed pull, which then they'll go to this stage, which then at this stage it needs 60 to 100 60 to 200 days 60 to 200 days to grow, and it'll turn like this, which at this is ready to harvest. Sticky pigeons! This is it. Perfect.